Mr. Kiriakou, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back and call me John.
John, thank you. I appreciate you being back. And since we last talked, I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, we really have no shortage of things to get into today. But
Yeah,
I thought we would start off really on, I think, one of the more pressing things that's going on, the Israel and Iran conflict and
yeah,
kind of the expansion of that. And disturbingly, I think recently we've just seen such an increase in the just blatantly genocidal rhetoric coming, not just from Netanyahu and the Likud party, but from Israeli polling. It's just a nightmare. You have especially these comments from I think yesterday or day before about
hmm
this greater Israel project. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
sure. The Greater Israel Project is something that until very recently, most Israelis were afraid to even admit existed. It's so bold and aggressive. It involves taking what a lot of Israelis would call biblical Israel back. That includes the southern, quarter of Lebanon, a large swath of Syria, most of Jordan, the Sinai Peninsula, and making this gigantic new Israel. Well, nobody had the guts to actually say that out loud until quite recently. And so, here we are with the farthest right wing government in Israel's history actually laying it out there as policy. There are several things that you mentioned that have me very worried right now. Um, Only in the last week or so did I come around to the notion that another hot war is likely between Israel and Iran soon, like by the end of August. I kept saying it didn't make sense for either the Israelis or the Iranians. The Iranians have been practicing what they're calling strategic patience, allowing themselves to be bombed, either not responding or responding with a fraction of what we would have expected them to respond with. But the Israelis just keep poking. Like they so desperately want the Iranians to attack them so that they have a reason to just clobber the Iranians and end this thing once and for all. Iran is a giant country. It's got what, 72 million people, 90 million people, something
Mhm.
like that. It doesn't make any sense for the Israelis to initiate a war like this. But it seems to be Israel's policy. That's point one. Point two is just yesterday, Netanyahu proposed at a press conference forcibly removing all Gaza Palestinians and sending them to South Sudan. This is the very definition of ethnic cleansing, which is a form of genocide. It's essentially, and I'm going to use this word on purpose, it's essentially moving all the Palestinians into a ghetto. Does that sound familiar?
Mhm.
Did the world learn nothing from the Warsaw Ghetto? So, yeah, this is utterly unacceptable behavior on the part of the Israelis. And what makes it so painful, or that much more painful, is that the U.S. just going along with it. Like, it's like we wake up every morning, whether a Democrat is in the White House or a Republican, and we take our orders from Benjamin Netanyahu and we just nod politely and continue to send billions of dollars in both economic and military aid. And if you complain in any way, you're somehow anti Semitic.
Same old
It's like
playbook.
it's not even acceptable to point out, quite correctly, in my view, that the Israelis are committing genocide.
Mhm.
There's no other word for it. They're
Mhm.
doing to the Palestinians exactly what the Germans did to them. And now we're in the starvation phase. And then
Mhm.
the Israelis released these pictures this week, like, oh my God, look at the starving hostages. Look, they're skin and bones. Yeah, they're skin and bones because you won't let any food in. So they're going to starve just like the Palestinians are going to starve. They can't just magically have food for the hostages and not have any food for the
Mhm.
Palestinians.
Mhm. We all know that, Netanyahu is going to try to drag this out as long as he can so he doesn't have to face the justice was coming
Correct.
towards him when this all began and transpired on October 7th. But what do you think has empowered them to finally come out and be saying these things out loud, like the Greater Israel Project? What's empowered them to get to this point?
I think it's been a series of victories that they haven't had in in the past,
Hmm.
like really since the '67 war.
Hmm.
Um, First was the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, working with the Turks. and probably the Americans, they were able to throw out Assad like almost immediately. Just as soon as they decided they're going to do it, a week later he's gone. So that was number one. Then this absolutely brilliant operation with the pagers that decapitated Hezbollah. And then after they had Hezbollah on its heels with the pager bombs, they just flattened entire apartment blocks in South Beirut and killed everybody who could possibly take over the leadership of Hezbollah. So Hezbollah, at least temporarily, has ceased to exist. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't exist as a fighting force. Then they turned their attention to the Iranians. And the Iranians didn't play by the Israeli rules. The Israelis bomb Iran, the Iranians don't do anything. The Israelis bomb Iran again, the Iranians send some drones, but they say, hey, we're going to send some drones. They're flying very slowly. It's going to take 6 hours to get there, right? And then there's no damage. Then they bomb Iran the third time. The Iranians say, well, we're going to have to respond now. They send more drones. Then they start hitting the nuclear sites. And not just hitting the nuclear sites. The Washington Post had a front page article accompanied by a video online. Not a video, sorry. On audio tape. That was Iranian Jews who had emigrated to Israel and were working for Mossad. They were calling on the cell phones, calling Iranian nuclear scientists and saying, listen, we're the Mossad. We're going to kill you tomorrow, right? It's done for you tomorrow. Unless you defect to us today, we're going to kill you. It's all over. And people are like, stop harassing me, or who is this, or whatever. They hang up. Then they call the wife and say, we're going to kill your husband tomorrow. If you're in the building, we're going to kill you too. So you have 4 or 5 hours to tell him to do the right thing and come over to the Israelis. And then what they do is to make sure to get these scientists, this is an Israeli policy, they will blow up the entire city block and take down every square inch of those apartment buildings. In the end, they killed 14 scientists and then sucked the U.S. in to using the mother of all bombs to blow up the nuclear facility that was the deepest. And so, why? Why are we doing Israel's dirty work for it? Why do we need to get involved in Israel's war? Why is it the U.S. that has to always send bombs and planes and Marines and fighters and ships? And why? And then we pay for it. So it's just been, the Israelis had one success after the other. And now they're at the point where they said, hey, this has been pretty easy. We haven't lost very many people. For all intents and purposes, the Iron Dome has held for the most part. Maybe we should just take over the whole region. The Americans will do what we tell them. And we'll tell them we need help. And they'll come and help us. We'll just take over the whole region. That's where we are right now.
Does Ukraine play a part in this greater Israel project? I see some things about that. Can you talk more about that?
After the fall of the Soviet Union, 2 million Ukrainian and Russian Jews emigrated to Israel, 2 million of them. And so it has been Russian policy since then to not take a position on Israel. The Russians were always sort of non-aligned. And then they sort of drifted to the Palestinian side when there still was a Soviet Union. Now there are so many Russians in Israel that they just can't support the Palestinians anymore. And then when the Iranians say, hey, we need your help, place us under the Russian nuclear umbrella, they're like, we're bogged down in Ukraine. We really don't want to get the Israelis mad. We wish you the best of luck. And we'll give you some spare parts for your MiGs. But that's going to be the end of it. So yeah, Ukraine does play a role.
Can you talk a little bit about the reputation that Israel had during your time in the CIA?
Oh, it was always very poor. We always had great respect for Mossad's capabilities. They're incredible. They're the best intelligence service in the world because they're ruthless and they have no rules. They can do anything they want. Kill, maim, rape, bomb. It makes no difference. They can do anything they want. But Israel has always been ranked as critical threat for counterintelligence, along with China, Russia, North Korea, Cuba, right? We have a very serious problem in the United States of Israeli spies infiltrating mostly American defense contractors and stealing defense secrets. Now, we give the Israelis 99% of what they want. But by God, they've got more than 200 people on the ground in the United States to steal that last 1%. And I'll give you an example. I've used this example before, and I think it's effective because it's true. When we developed the F-35 fighter jet, the Israelis said that they wanted to be the first to get the F-35. We said, great. So we'll give you the F-35. We are going to very slightly downgrade the avionics, and we're going to call it the F-35I for Israel. They said, no, that's not acceptable. We want the F-35, the same one that you guys have. We said no, because God forbid, if one gets shot down and the Iranians get it or the Russians get it, they're going to be able to reverse engineer the avionics and they'll be able to steal our secrets. So you get the F-35I. In the meantime, the Emiratis came to us and they said, hey, we want this F-35. We said, great, we're going to downgrade the avionics and we're going to call it the F-35E for Emirates. They said, great, we'll take it. Well, the Israelis are out there trying to steal it so they can re-upgrade the avionics behind our backs, because they don't care if one gets shot down and the U.S. loses the avionics. It's not anything off the Israelis' noses if the U.S. has secrets lost to the Russians or the Iranians or the Chinese. They don't care. They care only about Israel. There's this old saying that there's no such thing as a permanent friend. It's permanent interests. And it's Israel's interest to steal everything it can to survive.
Mm-hmm. Last time that you were on, we talked a lot about blackmail and Roy Cohn and Jeffrey Epstein. And it seems to be that this is one of the main ways that they have achieved the power and kind of the chokehold on American politics that the Israel lobby has. Would you agree that that's been one of the primary ways that they've gotten our unconditional support all these years?
I do agree. I think that's a very important component. The other component is the use of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. The Israel lobby is what a lot of people call it. AIPAC does not register as a foreign agent with the Justice Department. Everybody else does, but the Israelis don't have to. And they, half-heartedly say, well, we're not Israeli, we're American. We just happen to be Jewish and we love Israel. So we're not foreign. We're not supporting a foreign government. Of course they're supporting a foreign government. And then they sink millions upon millions of dollars into American political campaigns. If you are not 100% pro-Israel in Congress, they will primary you. And they will throw you out, and they will supplant you and replace you with a Zionist. And they do it every 2 years.
Yeah, look at what they're doing to Thomas Massie right now, or trying to do to Thomas
Exactly. They're going
Massie.
after Massie right now. Exactly. They beat Cori Bush in St. Louis in the last election, and Jamal Bowman and a handful of other people. But you look at some of these events, like when Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington a few weeks ago, and senators are clamoring to get into a picture with him. It's like, the guy's an indicted war criminal.
It's treasonous.
It is. It's treasonous. There was a Republican congressman from Florida who showed up on the floor of the House wearing an Israeli military uniform. Senator Tom Cotton has the Israeli flag in the hall outside his office. The Israeli flag. The governor of Pennsylvania, Josh, what's his name? Shapiro. Is it Shapiro? Yeah. Served in the IDF. He didn't serve in the U.S. military. He served in the Israeli military. So what country do you have loyalty to? You're the governor of an American state, and you're talked about as a presidential candidate, but you served in a foreign military?
It wouldn't be tolerated if it was any other country.
Yeah.
Do you think that, we all know that JFK was killed shortly after, the Dimona nuclear plant that he was trying to have inspected, but I think probably primarily him trying to have Israel registered under FARA, the Foreign Agents.
Yes.
I forget what the whole name of it is.
Registration Act. Yeah.
What do you think would have
Foreign
been
Agents
different
Registration Act.
if that had passed or he had lived? Was that just something that was not going to happen?
With the release of all the most recent documents related to the JFK assassination, I've come to my own personal conclusion that the Israelis had something to do with it.
Hmm.
And it was because he would not let up on Dimona. He insisted that Dimona be inspected. And he gave the Israelis a categorical no when they asked us for nuclear technology. And we said, not only no, but we're going to try to stop you from developing a nuclear weapon. Now, according to the Israeli nuclear whistleblower Mordecai Vanunu, they have as many as 220 nuclear weapons. 220. So, again, the only thing the Israelis care about is Israel. They don't care about us, our presidents, 9/11. They don't care. They celebrated 9/11 because they knew it would result in us killing Muslims, which we did. We killed millions of Muslims
Hmm.
in the wars that followed.
Hmm.
So yeah, they only care about themselves.
Hmm. A lot of that 9/11 stuff, I think, is a lot of people don't want to touch it because it's such a sacred cow kind of thing. But
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
it's littered with implication of Israel. I mean, even the mainstream, the stuff that lots of people know about, like the dancing Israelis, and that the
Yeah,
segment on Israeli TV that they were on after they were released by the FBI, where they literally say we were there to document the event, which
right.
implies foreknowledge. So what kind of action or legislation could help to limit the power of these lobbies and limit the effect of blackmail and these types of things?
Yeah,
What could we
that's a
do as
good question.
Americans?
That's a good question. I think that the very first thing that we need to do, and I'll preface it by saying it's never going to happen,
Hmm.
but the first thing that we need to do is to force APAC to register as a foreign agent. They have to register just like everybody else does. And if APAC has to register, they can't donate to political campaigns.
Hmm.
And if they can't donate to political campaigns, that stranglehold is lifted.
Hmm.
Stranglehold on American politics would be lifted.
Hmm.
I mean, if you run for office in the United States and you don't profess your undying loyalty to Israel, you're not going to get elected. 38 states now have laws saying that if you contract with the state, you have to sign a loyalty agreement promising to support Israel and not to criticize Israel. Can you imagine? I can't even fathom, I can't even wrap my brain around something like that. A friend of mine was hired to give a speech at the University of Georgia, and they said, "Oh, you have to sign this loyalty oath to Israel." And she's like, "Israel? I don't have anything to do with Israel." "Yeah, but it's state law. You have to promise to support Israel." She said, "Forget it." She sued, and it was overturned in Georgia. But there are 38 other states that still have these loyalty oaths. It's outrageous.
It really is. It really is. I hate to retread old ground, but I've heard you tell part of a story about a couple during your time in the CIA, a couple that I think
Mm-hmm.
moved to Israel and were
Mm-hmm.
harassed by the intelligence community. Can you tell
Yeah.
a brief version of that story?
Sure. I worked very closely with the husband and wife team when I was in the CIA, and we were all great friends. And when I got transferred to Bahrain in the 1990s, they got transferred to Jerusalem. The wife was going to work in, now, we're all analysts, by the way. We're not spies at this point. And so they're declared to the Israeli services. Declared means the station chief takes them into Mossad and says, "These are my people. They're both analysts. The husband's going to go to language school at the university. The wife is going to work on Palestinian biographical issues, just clicking biographical issues for the files." So no secret what they're doing, no secret that they're CIA. And the ambassador had a party for them, a welcome party in Tel Aviv. The embassy was in Tel Aviv at the time. They lived in Jerusalem. And when they got back home at the end of the evening, um, all of their living room furniture had been rearranged. And that's just a message from the Mossad. We know who you are. We can fuck with you anytime we want. Okay, fine. Message received. A lot of us go through stuff like that over the course of our careers. But then there was a Christmas party. And when they got home, people had taken shits in all of their toilets and just left it all unflushed. And that's just mean spirited. Like, is that really necessary to harass people like that? Like, what do
Right.
you hope to accomplish? Finally, the ambassador threw them a going away party when they were leaving 2 years later, and they got home after the party, and their dog was under the dining room table and it was whimpering because somebody had cut off its tail and wrapped the tail in gauze and medical tape. So, the Israelis may get a kick out of that, oh, look how we fucked with the Americans. But all that does is it makes people who otherwise would be your natural allies hate you. And so they do this to everybody who serves in Israel. And then they expect us to just fall down in our service to them and to give them every piece of intelligence they want and every piece of hardware that they want. And they don't understand why we're resistant and we don't like them.
Yeah, I asked you to share that just because I think it's really important to dispel this illusion of them being this, our closest ally in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East, that I think that myth and just the myth of the two-party system are two very
Yeah,
big blockades to, Americans coming together and kind of
totally
identifying a
agree.
common enemy. So I just think that's really important. So I appreciate you sharing that again. Um,
My pleasure.
with we're talking about Epstein and things like that. Did you see the news? Yes, I think day before yesterday about Ghislaine Maxwell being transferred prisons and maybe being granted some type of work release permit. Is
Work
that
release.
true?
Yes, and it's unprecedented. There are hard and fast rules in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the BOP,
Hmm.
where people convicted of child sex crimes are not permitted in a minimum security work camp.
Okay.
Okay. They also don't go to maximums or mediums because it's too dangerous for them there, unless they killed the child and then they're on their own. Um, Immediately after she met with the Justice Department, she was transferred from a low security prison where she was supposed to spend the whole 20 years into a camp. And then within 2 weeks, she was granted work release, which means she doesn't even have to stay in the camp during the day. She can just go off into town and work a job
Is
or
this
have weekends off and stay in a hotel with their relatives.
is this
It's
similar to
incredible.
Epstein's deal that he was given, where he pretty much slept at the prison and was this is back in Florida, like
Yeah.
2013 or something?
This is even looser
Wow.
because in this case, you're just on your honor not to abscond. Epstein was under house arrest. She can just come and go as she pleases so long as she doesn't run away and disappear. Unprecedented.
Is Trump under pressure to do this because of his own implication within their little blackmail operation?
Man,
What's your opinion?
you know, that's the only that's the only conclusion I can draw from all this. Otherwise,
Mhm.
none of it makes sense.
Mhm.
I love that Donald Trump is a supporter of sentencing reform. I love the First Step Act and the Second Chance Act. I love that he named Alice Johnson the pardon czar. I love that Ed Martin is the U.S. pardon attorney. It's all great. But this is a bridge too far.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was the Times of Israel, maybe, or Jerusalem Post put out a article the other day that was a very, very thinly veiled threat about Trump and why all this Epstein stuff is coming back to bite him in the butt now at this time when they're pressuring him to let them have a longer leash with what they want to do with Iran. So I find that very concerning.
Crazy. I'm very concerned as well. I
Yeah.
really am.
So another thing I wanted to talk to you about, I always have questions about this type of thing, but it's been really big in just the public sphere for the past couple of weeks, is this idea of people in media that work for, the intelligence agency or for the government at large, and obviously we know about Operation Mockingbird back in the 50s, and they had hundreds of intelligence people embedded in the media networks and stuff. But over the past week or 2 weeks or so, this has been really big public discourse with people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and these people that are basically all pointing at each other and saying, "You're a Fed, no, you're a Fed,"
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So my question for you is, how common is it for CIA agents or intelligence assets to be embedded in the media still? And how do you spot one? How do you spot a spook that's either a podcaster or a network television host? How do you know?
They don't do that anymore simply because they don't need to do it. And what
Okay.
I mean is this. I'm gonna answer your question with a story. I've got a friend, Jason Leopold, an absolutely first class A-list investigative reporter. He has filed more Freedom of Information Act requests than any other person in American history, to the point where the Pentagon spokesman once called him a FOIA terrorist. Well, he'll FOIA everything. They'll dump millions of pages of documents on him, and then he gets these incredible stories. He's the guy who broke the Hillary Clinton email story when he was working for Vice. And it's because nobody thought to just FOIA everything and then just go through it. So he told me once that he was bored. It was around Christmas, and so he filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all correspondence between the CIA's Office of Public Affairs and all American reporters.
Hmm.
Send. And what happens is the CIA never answers within the 60 days that they're supposed to answer. And so he files a lawsuit against them, and he always, always wins. And then they have to pay his legal fees on top of it, because the law is clear. FOIA request, 60 days, you have to answer it. I filed a FOIA request with the agency in March of 2015, and I'm still waiting. So he files this FOIA request. He sues them, they lose, and they send him everything. And he found some very, very interesting bits of correspondence. There were two that were particularly important. One was an exchange between CIA and Ken Dilanian, who's the chief national security correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, formerly of the LA Times Pulitzer Prize winner. And he was writing stories about the CIA and sending them to the CIA for clearance before he sent them to his own editors. Right? There was another reporter who was writing an article that sort of exposed CIA wrongdoing. And they wrote back to him and they said, "So help us God, if you publish this article, you will never be allowed to come to the Christmas parties ever again, and we will never give you another interview." And so he killed his own story. Mm-hmm. So they don't need to recruit anybody. They just bully them. Mm-hmm. They'll ruin you, knowing that there are 100 other people willing to do exactly what they tell them to do just to get the story. Even if it's a biased story or a fake story, it gets them published. So they don't need to do recruitments in the media like they did under Operation Mockingbird. It doesn't cost them a cent anymore. They just bully.
Mm-hmm. Deplatforming, censorship, the threat of that kind of, is that the main
well, yeah,
thing?
when you've got people embedded at Twitter and embedded at Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, yeah, it's easy to deplatform somebody. Mm-hmm. Easy. You just tweak the algorithm a little bit and they're out of work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What point do they start being concerned about someone, talking about a certain thing, or, to where they'll actually take action to try to minimize their exposure to the public?
Well, what they've always done is, if an outlet is going to go with a big story that's obviously classified, like exposing the torture program, for mm-hmm. example, the director of the CIA or the national security advisor will call the head of the network and say, "Please don't publish this. It reveals sources and methods, classified programs, whatever." Mm-hmm. And then it's up to the publisher or the network executive to make the decision. Now, the CIA almost always overstates the case. And remember, it is illegal to classify a crime for the purpose of keeping it from the American people. Torture is illegal. It's a felony. So to reveal a torture program is not a crime. Same with renditions or secret prisons or importing cocaine to make crack in LA or whatever it is. You can't classify that stuff legally. Mm-hmm. And so when the networks and the newspapers have broken these stories, nobody lost their life. Nothing ever happened adversely for the country. It's just the CIA trying to make sure that the information doesn't get out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm always curious. I mean, I find it hard to believe that, well, maybe not that they're assets fully, but that there are people out there, in the media world that, um, maybe not an agent of these agencies, but an
Mhm.
asset, and won't
Mhm.
talk about specific things. Like I watched your appearance on the Patrick Bet David podcast. I saw some clips from that, and I thought that you were really good at kind of countering some of the stuff that he was saying, a lot of which just to me sounded like very typical Hasbara bullshit. When it came to talking about Israel, we're
Yeah.
surrounded on all sides by our enemies, praising the pager attack and saying that the reason that Israel gets so much bad press is just because our intelligence agencies are simply jealous of them because they're so much better. And that's why it happens. And to me, that reads just so phony, either phony and stupid or like a very specific agenda. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I was told in advance that sometimes he comes out swinging. So to be prepared.
Hmm.
And he didn't come out swinging with me. We disagreed with each other politely, especially on these issues related to Israel. And he let me explain my side of the story, and then we just moved on from there.
Hmm.
But yeah, there was a lot that I could tell was just propaganda that he's absorbed, and it's become a part of his worldview.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I noticed that with lots of the different podcasters and stuff. It just they'll have one person on one day like this. I don't know if you've heard of the Nelk Boys. Unfortunately, I've heard of them. I've got family members that are younger and stuff, and this is a platform for young guys. And they had Netanyahu on, and they were very highly criticized about that. And then the next day they had Nick Fuentes on, and they were
Yeah,
obviously criticized for that too. So almost just
yeah,
playing both sides, just kind of
yeah.
a typical propaganda machine. So I don't
Yes.
know. I'm always on the lookout for that. And I thought you'd be, a good person to ask.
Yeah,
And,
I think that people make that mistake
mhm,
by concluding that if they have two extremists from opposite extremes on, that makes them balanced. And
mhm,
it doesn't often.
mhm,
It makes them look nuts.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Sorry, I've got a cat back here making
No, the
lots,
cat is so
lots of
cute. The cat wants to get in a little piece of the action there.
Yeah, she does. She always does. Um, so do you know who Lou Elizondo is?
Yes.
I guess he's supposed to be some sort of whistleblower with alien stuff and UFOs and
Yeah.
whatnot. That's
I've heard
that's
that a
what he's
number of
kind of.
times.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw something the other day coming out about him. I forget where it was from that I saw this, but I saw that he was involved in the torture program to some extent, or that there were actually allegations that he himself had tortured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Not a
And
chance.
so where did things like this start? And
Oh my God.
also this whole other sphere of, UFO disclosure and these types of guys, to me, it's really obvious that it's all just, diversionary and it's just a bunch of bullshit to keep people,
Yeah.
focused on the wrong things. But what's your
Agreed.
take on that whole aspect too? And Lou, do you know anything about him
Yeah, I've
particularly?
always considered Lou Elizondo to be a kind of a clown.
Hmm.
He's one of these guys that sort of has made up a background. There are a lot of people who served for 15 minutes in the military intelligence unit somewhere, and all of a sudden they're lifelong intelligence officers,
Hmm.
and they pretend to have access to sensitive or classified information. He's one of those guys
Hmm.
where he just makes it up.
Hmm.
And he's made money from it. He's got followers. He's on YouTube all the time. He's on podcasts. He's on these extremist TV shows on basic cable in the middle of the night. And I've just always considered him to be a clown. He never had anything whatsoever to do with the torture program. Listen, I know every single person that was involved with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. I worked with them for much of my adult life.
Hmm.
None of them were named Lou Elizondo.
Hmm. I just looked
I'll
back
give you
here.
another example, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, please, please.
I was on the Tucker Carlson show once. This is about I'm gonna say 6, 7 years ago, and I was in the green room getting ready to go on, and there was a guy in there, and he said, "You going on, Tucker?" And I said, "Yeah, you?" And he said, "Yeah." He was going to go on right after me, and he said, "What are you going to talk about?" I said, "Oh, I was in the CIA for a long time. I'm going to talk about that." He said, "Oh, really? Me too." I said, "Oh, you were in the agency?" "Yeah." Okay. First question that one agency guy asked the next every time: "What directorate were you in?" And he said, "I was in ops." Okay, that's not a term that we normally use in response to that question. You say, I was in the DO, the Directorate of Operations, the DO, the DI, the DS&T, or the DA, Science and Technology Administration Intelligence Operations. The second question is always the same. What division were you in?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody asked me, what directorate were you in? I'd say DO. What division? CTC, Counter-Terrorism Center. So I asked him, what division were you in? He said, oh, I was doing black ops, wet work. I did all that shit. It's like, buddy, that's like really the wrong answer. And I said, oh, cool, cool. So I go onto the set. I get mic'd up, and Tucker and I do our thing. He used to have me on for long blocks, 15, 20 minutes sometimes. So we go to commercial. And I said, Tucker, this guy that's coming on after me, I think the guy's a fake. He said, oh my God, what do you mean? And I told him, he just doesn't know the lingo. He's pretending to know the lingo, but it's all like movie lingo that in real life CIA people just don't use. Well, thanks for warning me, he says. 6 months later, I see this guy on the front page of the Washington Post. He's been arrested and charged with mortgage fraud. Mortgage fraud. What he did was he went to a bank in Annapolis, Maryland to get a mortgage to buy a new house. And they said, okay, you want this, $1 million, and we need pay stubs from the last 6 months. Can't give you pay stubs. CIA, deep cover, black ops, wet work, the company. Well, he never worked at the CIA, ever. He never worked anywhere, actually. He just took the $1 million and then couldn't make the payments. And so they arrested him, and he got like 5 or 6 years, something like that. But anyway, I tell you this story because this happens all the time. All the time.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, you can find those guys on YouTube.
Selling you some supplement or something, or a book.
Yeah. Or saying that they have this special access to secret UFO files, and they went to this special base that nobody knows about, and they met the aliens, and,
Mm-hmm.
they want to teach us, farming or whatever.
Why
They
has
all
there
have
always
elaborate
been that?
stories.
Why has there always been this weird overlap with like public intelligence figures or people like that and UFO occult
Yeah.
kind? I mean, even as far back as like Aleister Crowley, who we know now was working for British intelligence and stuff.
Yes.
I mean, all of his kind of occult philosophy is very much still wrapped up in like the current new age stuff, UFO things. It all overlaps a whole lot. Why is there this overlap with that kind of stuff? I mean, Jack Parsons, the list goes
Sure.
on of these types of people. Why is there this weird overlap with the
It's
occult?
the draw of the secret.
Hmm.
If I went on YouTube and said, I flew to a secret military base in the Nevada desert that nobody knows about, and there was an underground facility there, and I met with the lizard people. Prove me wrong, right? Prove that I didn't do that. Well, there are enough suckers around. Sorry, there's a fruit fly that I've been trying to kill since we started talking, and I
Good
can't seem
luck.
to get it. He's too fast for me. So anyway, there are enough suckers out there to latch onto this that the guy, attracts subscribers and viewers, and then he's making income through advertising, and he's writing his little leaflets and pamphlets about the latest UFO sightings, and he's got a little niche for himself. I never understood it.
Do you think it also could be used as a cover, just, by using such fantastical things that no one would ever think to look into it, or kind of automatically discredit it if something comes out about that group, maybe?
To me, it is discrediting.
Hmm.
I was undercover most of my career, and the easiest cover is the best cover, right? You work for a fly fishing company, or you work for an import-export company, or you work for a mutual fund or whatever. This elaborate, weird, meeting with the ETs, it's just too many moving parts, and people are going to think you're a crank,
Hmm.
and they're not going to want to be associated with you.
Hmm. Hmm. It seems like there's a big push for this stuff. Even just yesterday, there's this Anna Paulina Luna girl that
Right.
went on Joe Rogan and was spouting
Yeah.
off all this UFO interdimensional bullshit, you know. So do you
Yeah.
think it's just like it's always been that it's, you know, meant to distract people to think about stupid stuff, or do you think they're actually going to roll out some type of, people always talk about the next thing they're going to do is a big fake alien invasion or something like that. Do you think it's just the same old, same old?
I do. I think it's the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And I do think it's distracting. Sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sure. I mean, Rogan's huge, millions of downloads, and Luna is beautiful, and people like to look at her, and it's like the perfect storm of crazy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's entertaining at the very least.
It
So,
is.
well,
It
hey,
is.
I know we've got to run on to other things, but I appreciate you coming back on, and maybe we'll
My
connect here
pleasure.
in another couple months' time.
Good. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Good to see you, Noah.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.